AVC, what's up? It's me, yours truly. I am back to post a quick video here. It's time for another Ask Mr. Hall of Fame, where you guys ask me any questions you want about anything, music, personal, or otherwise, and I just get the pleasure and the joy of being able to respond. And I truly appreciate you guys leaving the questions that you have, and this has been an absolute blast. I always like to reiterate, any questions you have, please do not leave them on this video. Go to the link down below, click on that video, leave all the questions there. That way I have them consolidated to one video. As I go through and answer them, I hit a thumbs up and a heart to show that I've answered that in a video. And then the ones that are still blank, I know next time that's what I need to address. So please leave all questions on that video. But other than that, let's just kind of jump right into it. It's been a while, so I'm kind of looking forward to this. So going down the list here, we have a Wacky Anteater, who's someone who's left questions before, so I appreciate it. And the question is, got yet another question for you, Brandon, and it relates to genres. Ever since I started collecting, I've always had my vinyl and CD collections organized alphabetically. Nothing too fancy. But now that the collection has grown so much, I'm looking into separating it into genres. But due to the amount of variety and also volume of my collection, this seems like a daunting task and is definitely going to take up a time. So my question would be, how and where do I even start? Yeah, definitely a good question there. I'm obviously one that's very, very fond of genres, so I definitely understand kind of what you're saying there. The two things that kind of initially jump out at me would be what you mentioned about it being a daunting task and taking up time, and then with the amount of variety and volume, kind of make things a little difficult as well. On the part about the daunting task and taking up time, I would say one of the things I would say be a good starting point, and this may be kind of weird to say, but is maybe to make sure to change your thinking process about that. In other words, yes, it'll definitely take time, and it's a lot to do, but I think the mindset that will make it a lot more enjoyable is to think about it more so as kind of like enjoying the journey of doing it, the opportunity that you're giving yourself to interact with your collection in probably a way that you haven't interacted with it in probably quite some time, I would assume. And what I mean by that, actually, a perfect example of that would be a couple weeks ago, I was moving a CD shelf that I have, one where I keep my deluxe CDs and slim box sets and all of that. It's a tall, thin metal shelf, which usually leans up against the wall. I just had it sitting in the middle of the floor because I was moving it. I went to do some stuff. 5-10 minutes later, it fell over. Hundreds of CDs, deluxe CDs, my jazz collection, my easy listening collection, like all some country, like stuff just everywhere, hundreds of CDs. Now, the thing that I found very interesting about it was after I kind of confirmed that everything was fine, nothing got damaged or anything, I took the shelf, put it where I was going to put it, and now I have to clean up all of this. Now, I could have taken it as the daunting task of having to separate out hundreds of CDs, reorganize them, putting them back on the shelf, which would be daunting and taking time, but rather it actually turned into one of the most fun nights I've had in my music room in the past month or so. Because what it ended up doing was me engaging with each one of those CDs in a way that I haven't in quite some time. So I'm going through picking up some of my deluxe CDs, and I picked up like Black Sabbath Mob Rules, perfect example. 2 CD deluxe set, and my first thought when I picked it up was, I can't remember exactly what the bonus stuff was with the deluxe. And so I look on the back and it's, this live, and I was like, I don't really remember that track. I took the CD out and played it. And then I'm picking up the next one. I'm kind of looking at it, and the next one, and these CDs are upside down, like, and maybe I don't quite recognize what's underneath that. And it almost became like what's gonna pop up next? And I'm looking at the artwork and holding this CD again, which I haven't for some time, because every time I go to spin Mob Rules, I go to the vinyl. I haven't gone back to the deluxe CD. And it was just so much, it ended up being, I should say, so much fun interacting with that part of my CD collection, especially the deluxe CDs, that quite frankly, I just would not have done if that shelf had not fallen over. So there was kind of an excuse that made me go interact with that. And like I said, it ended up being such a fun thing to do. And I reorganized some things a little differently than it was when it was on the shelf initially. And so that's kind of what I'm saying is I would really focus on, or just make sure that that's the mindset that you're in, that you're not thinking I have to reorganize this thing, but like I'm going to get to like go through and just reconnect with every single album in my collection, you know, and truly do it that way. If you're, you know, I'm going in to reorganize, and maybe you're reorganizing and you get 70 records in, like you're just getting it started, and all of a sudden there's one record you pull out and it just makes you go, I haven't spun this in a while. Maybe you want to throw that on. Maybe you sit there and read the liner notes. It's like, I'm enjoying the process, so I'm not going to make it to where I have to get to the next record. I want to sit, listen, and enjoy this. Maybe I'll get back to reorganizing in an hour. Maybe I'll get back to it tomorrow. Doesn't matter. Just enjoy the process and enjoy interacting with your collection again. So that's, again, very generalization, but that's one thing I would say. And again, I have no idea about your space and, you know, kind of all of that. So obviously it's a lot nicer if you could pull stuff off of your shelves and go set them somewhere while you're organizing, like in another room or something like that nature. Then once it's all organized, bring each piece back into your music area. But again, I have no idea what your music area is like, your situation, and blah blah blah. But that, I think it's kind of just common sense with space. And then there was another good thing you said there too about due to the amount of variety. I'm assuming you're talking about like the different type of genres and different styles of music and all of that. Because people have always said things to me like, well, I can never do that because, you know, there's so many bands that fit into so many different genres. So how do you just put them into one? And, you know, there's only good music and bad music, and which is, again, is all fine if that's the way you experience it. My personal thought on that is, don't overthink it. You know, quite just like, don't overthink it. You know, if there are plenty of bands that can fit into a lot of different genres, I put a band just where my initial gut just kind of like, blah, that's just, without thinking about it, without overthinking it, that's just where I think I would put that band. So sure, that band could be in this category, this category, this category. In my music room, in my world, I've decided to put them in this category, and that's fine. And there's nothing that says 3 months from now, I get another hair up my rear and I say, I kind of feel them in this category now. Boom, and I'll move them. You know, it's just go with your gut. Don't overthink it. You know, even situations like, let's say you're kind of doing like 70s, 80s, 90s, and that type of thing. Well, I have Aerosmith that's from what, late 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. But I keep all my Aerosmith together because I just kind of feel like Aerosmith is just hard rock. So I'm just going to put Aerosmith into hard rock. I don't think about putting 70s Aerosmith, 80s Aerosmith, or whatever. But my Bruce Springsteen collection, no, early Bruce and 80s Bruce and 90s Bruce and 2000s Bruce, that stuff is very different to me. Like I don't feel a cohesion in that stuff. So my 80s Bruce is actually in my 80s pop rock. My 90s Bruce is actually in my 90s section. So why is Aerosmith all together, but Bruce is split? I feel them differently. I'm not explaining it or overthinking it. It's where I feel them. So that's how I do it. And again, there's no right or wrong to that. It's just the way that I organize and the way that I'll know how to find the Bruce that I want to find when I find it. When I go to my soundtrack collection, another great example. I used to have just a soundtrack tab. Now I have 2 tabs in my soundtrack section. One says soundtracks, the other says why the 80s you ask, ... And that is the genre that I created inside of my soundtrack section. Why the 80s you ask? And what I put under that tab are the movies that, to me, and the soundtracks that truly made the 80s such a magical time for me in being one of my favorite decades. Now, there are 80s movies that are great, obviously because I may have the soundtracks, that's why I have them, that are great, that are not under the why you ask the 80s. Because it's just, I don't overthink it. Is this one of the movies that just makes me smile and gets me so happy and gets me fired up about the 80s? Yes, it goes under why the 80s, you ask. This is a great movie. It's awesome. If it would have came out in the 90s or whatever else, would this movie necessarily represent the 80s for me? No, this doesn't represent the 80s for me, even though it came out in the 80s. That goes in regular soundtracks. It's just my gut feeling on each movie and each soundtrack. So when you think about making your genres, just do it that way. Let somebody that can come into your house when you're not home look through your collection and get somewhat of an idea of the kind of person that you are just by, that's just a genre he made up. So somewhere in his mind, that freaking genre is important. Like there's something in that he digs. Just be creative, don't overthink it. So that's kind of my suggestion there. So I hope that helps. I'm just kind of rambling quite a bit, but that's kind of a fun question. Next question, JetFan10. Hi Brandon. First, thank you for this series. I love it. Absolutely. Thank you for leaving the questions and watching, because I love it just as much. Question number 1. As we know, Japanese pressings include different kind of extras like posters, stickers, 7-inch singles, etc. So what is your favorite pressing that you already have, and what is something that you have seen and would like to own someday? Or maybe you're interested, or maybe you're not interested in the bonuses that much. Probably the latter part. I don't think if something has a poster or stickers and all of that, that has no bearing on whether I'm going for that or not. So I would say there's not really much of a motivation that draws me towards those little extras and stuff like that. But with Japanese pressings, really the two things that really come up with those is that they have to be in strong, excellent to near mint condition, and they have to have the obies. Like those are the two things that are absolute musts with me for Japanese pressings. I think I have 2 that I've ever purchased that didn't have an obi on them, but yeah, the extras just don't really guide me that much. My favorite that I have in my collection would be this here out of my Japanese collection, my John Coltrane Love Supreme. Not the most valuable, but it is my favorite Japanese pressing that I have, and that's a 1973 Japanese pressing. In terms of maybe something that I want to own someday, I would love to get a lot more Maiden on Japanese pressings with Maiden. Especially like maybe through the first 5 or 6 albums. That would be kind of cool, but so that's kind of where I would be on that. And then question 2, you said, I noticed after you moved to this current new place, you had posters on the back wall, but now I see some padding or curtains instead. Weren't you happy for the sound of your unit, or what's the story behind the change? Yeah, basically I just kind of did some soundproofing in the room just to kind of, I really was very happy with my system. And so this was kind of something I did just to take my listening experience even up a notch. And it has made my system sound even better just by doing some soundproofing. With having this kind of this office and more of a controlled space maybe than I've had with my previous music rooms. So yeah, that's basically all it was, just kind of adding sound treatments and all of that. And it really has taken the sound of my system and the listening experience up a notch with doing that. So maybe if you want to know a little more details about like why I did that, like maybe there's people here that have never dealt with any type of soundproofing or anything of that nature, I can kind of explain that or something in a video. Be a good Ask Mr. Hall of Fame question. But yeah, I'm always kind of looking to make the experience a little bit better. And I didn't even spend $200 on the stuff that I did to kind of do that as well. So that's kind of what that is. 1420. Let's go ahead and do one more. So it's been a while since I had a chance to chat with you guys. So let me find one more question here. Charlie 10. Hey Brandon, how do you adjust the sound of your listening rooms? Example, I moved this month and my stereo room just doesn't sound as good as my previous place I lived. So how do you compensate for listening rooms all the times you have moved? Like room acoustics, size of the room, rugs, furniture, etc. Okay, another good question, maybe kind of playing into what I just answered there. without knowing anything about your situation and so forth, again, 'cause this just I'm just guessing out of thin air. Um, every room is definitely a little bit different. So there are certain things that obviously you can do to make stuff better, and sometimes, uh, well, let's just put it like this. I would like to kind of know what the issue is that you're having in your room that doesn't sound as good. Like, are you experiencing something where things kind of sound very like hollow, like you're in a cave or something like that, with like a lot of somewhat echoing effect? Um, in the speaker placement in the new room, sometimes we set up our systems and it kind of like we put speakers where they go because it's the most convenient place to put them, but we don't actually spend a lot of time moving our speakers around, pulling them further away from the wall, centering them more in on the actual listening area. So sometimes just playing around with where you have your speakers in the room, and we're not even talking about like moving it from here all the way over here. Sometimes it's about bringing them closer together, bringing them closer to you, sometimes towing them in a bit. Like, you can really play around quite some time adjusting your speakers to find the right placement. That makes a big difference in how a room will experience that sound. Could it be the new room that you're in? The speakers just aren't ideal for that room. Maybe they're too small for the room that you're in, or too big, or just like, kind of whatever. Maybe the thing is, I may need different speakers for this room. Sound treatments. Do you have wood floors? So do you, like I said, do you have rugs? Do you do sound treatments if you're experiencing kind of some of an echoing effect? There's so many different things that can kind of come into play with why something may not sound as good as it did in a previous area. But in a lot of cases, really the only way to figure that out, again, without knowing anything about your situation, is just to kind of play around with it. Again, different speaker placement, and sometimes even where shelves are, because obviously, again, reflecting sound off of shelves, like where you have bookcases or vinyl racks and stuff like that in your room, that can make a difference in how it sounds. So yeah, I would kind of like to know a bit more specifics, but that's about as general as I could probably get with that question. So I apologize if that doesn't help out as much. What I typically do when I move to like a different music space is I almost always, well, actually I do always, I set up my stereo and my listening area, like my chair or my couch, always set that up right where I want it, and kind of play around with it for a while before I start setting up my vinyl racks and stuff like that. So that's kind of been the way that I've gotten the best that I could get out of a room. And then, sometimes, like I said, it's just, I may actually need a bigger amp. I may actually need different speakers that can fill a room more, because bookshelf speakers can't do what tower speakers can do. It's just, just that type of thing. So hope that helped out somewhat. Again, I feel I'm kind of rambling in a very vague place there, but yeah. So as always, VC, thanks so much for stopping by. Thanks for the questions, guys. And I'm going to come back really soon, probably the next few hours, actually, maybe, and do another Ask Mr. Hall of Fame. So appreciate it. Let me know what you think, VC, and we will talk to you soon. All right, take care, guys.